That's why I can't wait for another ceremony, because every time I go, it's like I get more enlightened. I learn how to deal with life a different way. Each time I go, it's more and more cleansing that's going on. More and more I'm at peace. And I think a lot of people need to realize that no matter who a person wants to be or who a person wants to be with, love that person no matter what, because that person is a human and God has made them, and he challenged us to love.
Hi friends, welcome back. This is Unbroken Chain, the podcast, episode 61, and I am Maura James, here with you once again. You guys, this is a really, really special conversation. I can't believe that I got to be part of this and that Damian, my friend, trusted me to help share some of his story. I met Damian here in Birmingham, and he is a member of the Native American church that Daniel and I have joined down here, which is run by our friend Chris Rushing, who was on the podcast. Let me look up real fast which episode. 39, Spiritual Surgery with Chris Rushing. Chris started a branch of the Native American Church, which has a federal mandate from the United States government that protects the use of plant sacrament ceremonies, which means that he openly holds peyote medicine ceremonies for anybody that wants to join the church. And Damian is one person who, like Daniel and I, was called in by Chris's signal and started taking medicine within the last year. And we've been in a couple ceremonies with him and jammed out on the drums together. He is a really beautiful person, and he's at a really interesting time in his life right now, coming into all this medicine and growth, because he currently works as a corrections officer at a prison here just outside of Birmingham. And holy shit, that is hell, as he talks about. And this conversation is some real talk about what happens inside prison as he's seen it as a corrections officer, and also as a kid in juvenile detention. And what I'm so grateful for in this conversation is context, like the reminder that how people end up committing harm and violence and doing things that we agree as a society are absolutely not okay. There's a path to getting there, and it involves being harmed and not having access to the tools, the love, the growth, the rehabilitation on the other side of that harm. And what our culture does with traumatized people is traumatize them more deeply and tell them that it's their fault. And it's a really dark, really vicious cycle that we're seeing completely break down at this point. It just gives me goosebumps that somebody like Damian, who basically lives in prison, is now tapping into plant medicine, and his willingness to see people in context, including the people that he's guarding in prison, is, I think, such a powerful manifestation of Jesus's message, the message of so many teachers, and also of plants. I think it's such an essential question that our culture asks right now, like, what do we do with people that cause harm? Because there is accountability that has to happen. Like, this is not about excusing harm, but how do we deal with it in a way where there can be real rehabilitation and redemption and an opportunity for people to return to the gifts that have been stolen from them by whatever trauma they've been through that has led to dysfunction and violence. So before I get into this conversation, I'm going to make a quick pitch for the documentary film that I'm making, which is very much on this subject. It's really beautiful that Damian's the guest this week. As many of you know, I launched the trailer for the documentary that I've been making a couple days ago. The film is called Surviving America. I'm going to keep this fairly concise because there is an Indiegogo page that I have set up to raise funds to finish post-production on the film. We have everything shot, so at this point we just need to finish editing and then hire on some people that are way more talented than we are at color grading, sound mixing, scoring, those kind of things. And also, if you're one of those people and want to collaborate, please reach out. That would be super dope. So there's a write-up there that tells the story behind the project more in depth. But to give a brief introduction here, basically, Daniel and I were living in rural Georgia last year for several months, and we went into Milledgeville, which is the nearest town of any note, still quite humble. And there is a really famous institution there called Central State Hospital, which for most of the last century was the biggest insane asylum in the country. And I encourage you to Google that too, because there are really harrowing stories about what went down there. It was like cutting edge when it opened in, I think, 1842. But by like the mid 1900s, it was like one doctor for 100 patients. They opened prisons on the campus to basically shuttle mentally ill patients that were fighting back against abuse just right into prison. Really dark shit. It finally closed in the 1990s. And so now it's just this massive sprawl of boarded up, falling down buildings. And the college students at the college in town try to sneak over there at night to kind of go ghost hunting. It's sort of a local landmark. In the process of checking this place out, Daniel and I met and befriended this group of guys who were in their like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and they have just gotten out of prison within the last year, and all of them have spent at least 20 years in there, but some of them, one of the guys was in there for 45 years, so they've spent the majority of their lives in prison, and now they're free. They're living in a facility that was built recently on this campus, but they're kind of in purgatory because they don't have family. Their close family members are now either dead or have disowned them. A lot of them for really good reason. Like, some of them admitted to doing really dark stuff. And then they spend decades and decades living in a box in some cases, thinking about that stuff that they done and why they did it, and about the people that they hurt, and about who they are and who they want to be. So now they're back out in the world, but they have no families, they have no money, no job prospects. It's really hard to get hired when you're an ex-con. Like the minute you put that on a background check, you're automatically counted out of so many places in corporate America, big box store America. And, they don't have transportation, so they're in the middle of this, like, sea of ruins, and the nearest place they can walk is the Dollar General. We spent about 6 weeks. We would just go over there in the afternoons and hang out with these guys, and, I feel like most things that I make, I'm working right at the edge of my skill set and my knowledge. I'm learning by doing. This project in particular has been so deeply, deeply humbling. First of all, just the trust that these guys showed us. A lot of them just said at the beginning, like, I've never trusted anybody because of the stuff that happened to them in childhood, and then spending years and years in very violent prisons where, as my friend Chase said the other day, who spent time in jail, you can get killed for farting in the wrong place, which sounds funny, but is also not funny at all. So we talked to these guys. We really became friends with them, which is really what happens when you're making documentary films. You fall in love with your subjects, which I would argue is really like what these times are asking of all of us, is to like fall in love with the world. It really challenged me to learn what it means to like really meet people where they are, to not judge and just be present, and to realize how abandoned these people are by society, by all of us. We really like to pretend that these people don't exist, and that once they go into prison, whatever happens to them is fine because they did bad shit and so they deserve it, right? And then the ones that do get ejected back out, it's like, nobody, not in my backyard. And the problem is, yes, in our backyard, every week 10,000 people are released from prison. And the reason why so many of them end up back in, 75% of them usually end up back in within 5 years, because they have to survive by any means necessary. We make it really hard for them to be functional, healthy, contributing people. A lot of them spoke about the fact that they've never had counseling of any kind, either, as children or, God forbid, in the prison system. But a lot of them just haven't been able to have a conversation with somebody, period, ever, where they haven't been judged for the worst thing that they've ever done. The world sees them as cons, now and forever and doesn't want to hear about it. The message that we're sending is that human lives in this country are not worth very much. And that's really scary. And that should be really scary for all of us, whether or not we know somebody that's been directly incarcerated. We're all very vulnerable if those are really our values. And I think a lot of us would say those aren't our values, that we do believe in redemption and rehabilitation. But the problem is that our systems and our institutions don't actually reflect those values. And it's coming to a head. I really believe that there are better ways, that transformative justice and restorative justice are not just philosophies, but they are actual practices, and they start with our relationships to our own thoughts and to one another. So that was longer than I meant it to be, but I would be so grateful if you would check out the fundraising link for that project if you haven't already and if it resonates with you. I have been making this podcast and working on these film projects on a shoestring, living really minimally. I'm living the life that I want to, but I'm also at a point where to make this in the way that I want to, in the way that I believe that it deserves, I need to reach into my community and ask for help from anyone that's able to give. And if you're not able to contribute money, I'd be really grateful if you would share it. Share it on Facebook, especially because I'm not on Facebook. I really appreciate your belief and support in the project. It really directly makes it possible for me to continue seeking out perspectives that deserve our attention. I actually really think the answers are pretty simple right in front of us, and that if these kind of stories can help us go into our heart space and short circuit a lot of the fear and the storytelling that we have about each other, we actually all really know what to do. So thank you. Okay, here is my sweet friend Damian. Thank you so much, Damian, and thank you to all of you. I'm really glad y'all are here.
My name is Damian. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. I'm 34. I'll be 35 in April. This is my first podcast, and I'm very interested, willing to open up.
Thank you for being here. Yeah.
Of course.
Well, maybe we could start by just talking a little bit about how we met.
Oh, the ceremony.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we met at the ceremony. It was a beautiful night. I met a lot of new people and basically got to know people on a spiritual level and, set out, played music, talked, experienced a lot of spirituality under the moonlight. It was very beautiful. A very beautiful experience.
So how did you find your way out to a peyote ceremony in Warrior, Alabama?
Yeah, that's a great question. Knowing my background being from Ainsley and coming all the way from Ainsley to Warrior, Alabama, doing peyote is very different. Well, I found myself at a peyote ceremony through Chris, the leader of the church, and basically contacted him through Facebook and basically wanted to experience individuality and spirituality more, is what I say. And basically just being around different people from different cultures and backgrounds and beliefs and being open to human beings, basically.
So when you say you're from Ainsley, what does that mean?
Well, Ainsley is mostly a slum of a neighborhood where you have to be a certain way to survive a certain way. And basically Ainsley would be where you see you guys that are negative, like you guys that are in their early 20s but drive cars that are from the late 70s with the rims on it, just the stereotypical guys, which I was one of those guys. And it took me to basically become myself and basically decide I wanted to live my life for me and not everybody else, to kind of open up to, making a change. Because in Ainsley and a lot of parts of Birmingham, Alabama, if you're a young black male, you're supposed to be a certain way. You're supposed to be this thuggish guy, this hardcore guy. And basically that's all you're supposed to be, and that's all you're allowed to be, or else you're labeled as different. And being young, nobody wants to be different. Everybody wants to be a part of something. Everybody wants to be the person that fits in. It was only until I got older that I realized that I wasn't made to fit in, basically. I was a different shape. So once I accepted that fact, life kind of changed for me. Totally. Like, I started to meet a lot of different people, and I started to realize that life is not about negativity. It's not about constant death. It's about life, basically. So, that's what kind of led me to experiencing the ceremony and meeting a lot of different people, and basically going on this journey that I continue to travel on, and, wanting to learn more.
What was the trajectory for young men that were growing up where you grew up? Like, what was the expectation for you?
We were called hood, and basically when you're hood, you only have 3 options, and that's to make it out of hood. You only have 3 options. That's to sell drugs, to be a professional basketball or football player, or to be a rapper, basically. So a lot of people go to music as their go-to to make it out of this lifestyle. And when that music doesn't work, or they fail at their project, they tend to be down on themselves and go back to the lifestyle of, I want this, but I can't afford this, so I'm going to take this, basically. And if you're in an environment where there are no jobs in sight, and you're in a neighborhood where everybody is struggling, everybody, and there's no assistance, you're going to basically find a way. Like one person said, my baby needs feed and she can't do it without it. So my big 45 is going to scout it, basically. So what he's saying in the rhythm is, okay, I have to feed my family, and these people won't hire me, and I don't have a lot of resources in order to feed my family the correct way. So regardless, my family has to eat. So I will have to, take what I need to feed my family. And it still goes on to this day. And I think a lot of people in that area do not realize that you don't necessarily have to take from anybody, or you don't necessarily have to be a rapper. There's a lot of more options out there. But when you're from a certain place, you're a product of your environment. So what's going on around your environment is basically what you kind of fall into. And if you don't meet anybody that has a different opinion, you're going to be basically having that same opinion until the day you die, or until the day you learn. And you'll find I refer to a lot of things in music and a lot of experiences I had. But I want to say Bob Marley said, life is one big road with lots of signs. So when you're traveling over the rocks, don't complicate your mind. Meaning, when you get into a tough spot, don't let that tough spot break your spirit, basically. And also, life is a thing. When you learn, you grow. Basically, if you don't learn anything, you stay stagnant at this level. That's why you meet people that are, up in their late 40s or late 50s, but they have the mentality of a younger person, basically, because they're stuck on that level, because that's where they stop learning. They stop growing at that stage. And I think for a lot of people my age and in that particular environment, they stop growing because school was not designed for these type of people. You go to school and you learn different things, but the education system, we're very undereducated, extremely undereducated. You have, these old books and these teachers that really don't want to be here, and they could give a damn about teaching you anything that'll better you. So, if you're not being satisfied and fulfilled at school, you're going to drop out of school, which I did. I dropped out of school. I decided, hey, school is not for me, and there wasn't anybody to tell me otherwise. So I dropped out at the age of 15, and basically I was happy to be out of school. And it was only until I got older talking to this older guy that basically set me down and kind of made me brainstorm my life, because at that point I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to go to school. I wanted to be at home every day, just free to walk around, but not knowing if I continued that path that I would eventually end up on the streets and poor. Nobody wants to be poor. Basically, nobody wants to live on the streets. However, there are people that are poor and are happy to be poor because they have the experience of life itself and the spirit of, the Most High, that they know that they're going to eat regardless because it's going to be a way. It may not be the food that they choose, but it's going to be nourishment for their bodies. So, I don't know.
I was just thinking while I was listening to you that I think you're speaking to something so important that doesn't happen certainly in most public schools and in a lot of neighborhoods that are designed like Ainsley. Like, we just don't teach people how to use their gifts. It's like you fit into a box or you're not useful.
Yeah, exactly. There's also a lot of stuff that goes on with the school system itself. Say, for instance, the education would be different in Hoover. And I remember when I was young, they had these tests they would give to the underprivileged kids in these type of schools. It was a psychological test, basically. And I remember I took this test, and the questions would be, how do you feel about your home life? At home, I'm happy. At home, I'm sad. Does my family yell a lot? Do they scream a lot? Can I pay attention? And I remember taking these tests at a very young age. And also, after I took these tests, I was placed on medication, Ritalin, Adderall. And, basically, they were tests designed to give to certain type of people. And I remember the Adderall and the things I were taking was like, I want to say 50 milligrams or something like that. They were overdosing me, and I just remember being on medication at school because I had a behavior problem, obviously. But I remember just sitting in class, not eating. I lost so much weight, and I just remember the feeling of chemical restraint. Like, I couldn't move. I just sat there, and it was just an awful feeling. I wanted to explain what I was going through, but I couldn't explain it because I was young and I didn't know how to explain how it made me feel to my mother. And also, one thing I learned is when you're poor and you need assistance, you would basically let a lot of the government researchers do a lot of stuff with your child. My mother was very poor and underprivileged, and I received a $500 a month check, but I took so many different type of medications, and I did so many different type of therapy sessions, and talking to people with pens. And I just remember being very uncomfortable with this guy talking to me, and this lady's writing down everything I say, and just more medication, and it was pretty much bad for the most part. And a lot of my cousins went through the same thing, and they called them first of the month crazy checks.
Oh my gosh.
So,
When you left school, did you also kick the medicine to the curb?
Oh, I did that when I was basically still in school. I just stopped taking it. I'd tell my mother I was taking it, but I wouldn't take it because I didn't like the way it made me feel. I just would sit there for hours. I wouldn't even look at TV. I'd sit in a quiet room for hours. And
because so much was going on inside of you?
Because of the medication. My mother would even give it to me outside of school. Like, basically, she would give it to me every time they told her to give it to me. Like, so many times a day for so many hours or whatever. And I'd take it, and it was like a disassociate. Like, I was in my body, but I couldn't react the way I wanted to react.
Wow.
I was just, like, basically in a daze, in a trance. But I knew what was going on, but I seriously could not move. It was like, it was a lot. And I've never told anybody this story, which is kind of odd. So, there's a lot that I can talk about. And from childhood, just growing up in that environment, growing up with an abusive stepfather. my stepfather was very abusive to my mother. He used to beat my mother in front of us. And I remember one day he beat my mother so bad he ran her head to the wall that she passed out. Now, me being very young, me and my sister thought that she was dead. He was an awful man. And he would make us go down to our grandmother's house. And I just remember that day I just didn't want to leave because she was just lying there. And I had never seen anything like that at that age.
So scary.
It was scary. Now that I think about it, I've been through a lot of stuff. It's a lot of hurt. I think that's another reason why me going to these ceremonies and opening up to people is very great for, me growing as a person. But it's been a lot of stuff in my childhood that I can't get over and a lot of stuff that I'm trying to get over, but it's just a lot of bad stuff. And now I have 3 kids of my own, but I find myself having some of the characteristics of my stepfather because he was the only male that was in the house. And I never want to be like him. I remember me and my sister had pet dogs, and my sister was in school at the time, and I was young. And a lot of people say that you don't remember stuff from when you're like 4 or 5. However, I remember my sister being in the 1st grade, and I wasn't in school, so my life was waking up and going to play with our dogs downstairs. And I remember we had 2 little dogs. I don't know what kind they were, but mine was a brown and hers was black and brown. And I remember every time they would take her to school, I'd stay there with him and I'd go down and I'd play with my dog. So one particular morning, I remember waking up, getting into my routine and wanting to go down and play with my dog. And I remember hearing the dog kind of hollering, like screaming, making a sound. And I went, and my sister's dog was at the top of the stairs. And I went to look for my dog, and my dog was down at the bottom of the stairs, and he was flat. Blood was all around him. So I asked my sister what happened, and she told me a spider bit him. So I was like, wow. I was so young that I believed the spider bit him. However, I also saw a monkey wrench, this big long tube, covered in blood. Come to find out that my dog had shitted on my stepdad's clothes that were downstairs, and he beat my dog to death. And me and my sister ended up picking up the dog and putting it in a bag and taking it across the fence and throwing it across the fence. This man was so evil that he left that dog down there, and my mother stayed with him for 20 years, and I never forget that. And they would get to fighting, and she would call herself leaving him, and then she'll send us to her friend's house. We spend the night over her friend's house, and they'd be the one to come tell us, hey, he's back at the house. And
was he drinking? Was that part of it, or?
I just think he was an evil person, me personally. I remember when I was young, I remember when she kind of first met him. I remember a lot of stuff when I was very young. But I remember meeting him, and he was nice to me a few times. And then I remember one day I got on his foot to kind of ride his foot. As he walked, I wanted to ride his foot, and that man kicked me to a wall. Yeah. So, yeah. It was rough. It was a lot of hurt in those days. And I think that's why I have a lot of trust issues, and I think a lot of negative stuff about people because of that experience. Yeah.
Have you been able to talk to your mom about that?
She gets angry. She gets very angry because she always says that nobody's perfect, but it's like she just won't understand, or she doesn't want to hear it. And also, so this started my days of juvenile because I used to run away from home. And
I can see why.
Yeah, I never wanted to be at home, and there was a curfew law out that if a kid is caught at 12 o'clock or 10 o'clock on a school night, the parents have to pay or whatever. But my mother would choose this man that beat her over her kids. Like, it kind of tears me up inside to this day. And I just remember I never wanted to be there. And I remember cutting myself out all of the family pictures. Like the pictures of my mother held me when I was born. I cut myself out of that picture. Like, I'm not in any of the pictures. You don't have any pictures of me when I was a little boy because I didn't feel like a part of the family. Like, this man would beat my mother so bad, and he would do us so wrong, and she would go back to him and back to him. And it's just, I began to rebel. I began to act out because at a certain age I was muscular and no man was gonna beat my mother when I was there. So I remember just kind of you gotta pause, right?
Sure.
All right. So we're back. You can ask me some more questions.
Well, I'm curious, because you work in corrections now, I'd be curious what your experiences were with the criminal justice system as a kid and juvie on the other side.
Oh, juvenile. Juvenile was pretty tough for the most part because you had guys that already had their mentality and their mindset. Like I was told plenty of times that I'd be dead by 21 or I'd be in prison by 21. And the funny thing about that is I'm actually going through a court case with the juvenile system because I was a juvenile officer at the same juvenile system that I was at when I was younger.
Whoa.
Yeah, so yeah. Everything was about the gang life, because this is what I embraced because I had no positive male role models. So being around these older guys that were gang members, I thought they were cool. And I looked at them as older brothers, big brothers. I wanted to be the guy with the gold teeth and the cars with the big rims on it, Growing up in that side of town, you see that as, wow, he's made it, he's flashy, and you just think that this is what I want. This is what I want to be like. So I fell into that. And I remember being young and smoking blunts and, wearing the color red because, oh, I'm a blood. I thought it was cool. And, you have rappers talking about it. You had like Ice-T and Ice Cube, they're known gang members. Snoop Dogg, known gang members. So they're glorifying this lifestyle. And, this is what I embraced, that lifestyle. So juvenile, I met a lot of guys that were like me. But I also met one guy in particular. His name was Bailey. I think he still works at the juvenile. I worked with him at the juvenile as well for a time. But he would come in and he would tell us these stories about prison and what it was like in prison because he was a correction officer at a prison before he came to the juvenile. And I just remember him saying that the hardest man in here is not hard when everybody else is hard as well. And he asks us, like, if a guy was to come up to us in prison and wanted to rape us, what would we do? And we answered, well, I stab him to death. I do this, I do that. And then he explained, okay, where would you get the knife from? Because you have to pay for a knife in prison. And when you go to prison, you don't have any money. And especially if your family doesn't come to see you, you basically a person that has nothing. So you're going to do trades, which will be sometimes sexual favors to these men to get what you want. And we never thought about that at that age. But as I got older and I started to work at a correctional facility, which I work in now, I started to see this as actuality. Like, these people go through a lot. And if they don't have money on their books to buy stuff from the store, because the food is so awful and it's fixed by the inmates. So if you have an enemy in there that's in the kitchen, you most definitely don't want him fixing your food. Because yes, they most definitely do all the stuff that you hear about. Yes, they do it. It's pretty much awful, man. There's a lot of homosexuality that goes on, some forced. A lot of it is forced because they have drugs in the prison system that are brought in by the officers and the nurses from the outside, but these guys want to escape from reality, basically. So they take drugs to deal with the fact that they're in cages. And if you don't have the money, it's just like a game. They would trick you into, hey, it's okay, you can smoke with me, you can do this with me. And then one day it's like, hey, you remember all those times you smoked with me? You got anything to put in? And you're like, no, I thought we were cool. So obviously, you just made a boyfriend, basically. And people, they're gang members in there. So this gang owns you now, and you perform sexual favors for these guys. And they tell you there's either going to be blood on my dick or there's going to be blood on my knife. You choose. So,
Wow.
yeah, and you'd be surprised how many guys choose that dick over that knife.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say, well, yeah, they have to kill me, but trust me, the knives that they have, hey, you don't want that. It's ridiculous. It's awful.
So did you, at some point you were like, no more gang life, and then did you choose corrections as sort of like a career that could get you some stability?
Well, when I first chose to change my life, I actually chose auto body. I learned how to paint cars and pull dents because I was still fairly young. I was in my early teens and late teens, early 20s. So I was pretty much still into the stereotypical black male, fixing up the old school cars and putting rims on them. So I wanted to be able to paint cars, so I learned how to do that at Lawson State. And me being a dropout and going back to get a GED, I didn't realize that once I had that GED, I could do anything. I thought that I only had to do it like a technical trade or something like that with a GED, and then I found out that I can actually, it's just like a degree. And once I found that out, I kind of did all I can do in auto body, and I switched over to criminal justice. And my thing was to be a probation officer. However, I didn't realize that I can go beyond that. And now my goal as of now was to be an attorney. And now I'm getting more into, just being able to do anything in life. Now I kind of sway between being an attorney or a dentist. So, but I went into corrections and I started going to school at Lawson State, taking up criminal justice. And then I started working at the Juvenile Detention Center, which is the same one that I was housed in as a kid. And I remember the guy that talked to me. So I was that guy that talked to the kids. I even took them to the cell where I had marked my name. Of course, it was painted over with, it was painted over by that time. But just giving them my story, being a juvenile and how I made it out. And basically, they didn't have to do the things that they were doing because no kid at the age of 15 needs to rob anybody because you live at home with your mother. You have a roof over your head, you have clothing, you have food. It may not be the clothes that you want and it may not be the food that you necessarily want, but you have this. And a lot of guys, they fall into the same pattern because those same spirits are in that neighborhood. And it's going to continue to this day. You have these guys that are in their early teens that are robbing people, that are shooting people. And I want to say it most definitely has to do with the music because music carries a spirit. There's this band called 3-6 Mafia, and one of their songs says, "I bet you won't hit a motherfucker." And people in the club are just dance to it, and this person bumps this person, and guess what? It's a fight now. So the music carries a spirit, and most definitely when you're that young, those spirits influence you a lot because you think it's cool and you want to be like this until you go to a place where that's not the culture and you start to adapt their norms, like going to school and playing instruments and just doing stuff that doesn't involve negativity or violence. And
Is that mainly what, like, I feel like my concept of gang life is probably a little bit like cartoonish, but is it a lot about like robbing people, or is it a drug thing?
Yeah, most definitely. And it's so silly because I went over for a gang and they have this stuff what they call wisdom and knowledge, and it's basically gang secrets. And this is the God's honest truth. And some people that may be what they call bloods, which stands for brotherly love. BLOOD stands for brotherly love overcomes our depression. So their knowledge or wisdom was there's 6 apples behind the tree. Now me being older, I'm like, okay, what the fuck does that have to do with anything? Where is this tree and why does it have 6 apples? But back then this was sacred knowledge, So I took it and I embraced it. There was a lot of code words that didn't amount to shit, that didn't mean anything. It was basically dumb people telling dumb shit to other dumb people to keep them dumb, basically. And it has reached to white kids now. You have your thuggish white kids, and I tell you something about these white kids. If there's a white boy that hangs with the group of black gang members, he's one of the most deadliest people you know, because he had to do something very dramatic to gain these guys' respect.
Yeah.
So it's just the culture, man. It doesn't matter what race you are. It's the culture that takes you. And it's a culture that's destined to fail. That's why you always hear about death, young black male. And to be a black male at the age of 35, although you're not rich, you pretty much made it, because it's a death game, basically. Between the ages of 13 to 20 something, it's a death trap, And if you're not dead, you're in prison. And prison is filled with the young black males that grow to be old black males that didn't have the opportunity to become themselves. And people say that a man is not a man until he's in his early or late 30s, which I believe is true. Because although I was in my early 20s, I still was, I still acted like a boy for the most part. If you don't know any better, you never learn any better. There's no way possible that you can ever do any better. So.
Well, it's just when there are so few outlets or like sources of wisdom for you and you're seeking belonging, like why wouldn't you join a gang?
But also I think that the government has a lot to do with it, because in the neighborhoods I'm from, we didn't even have grocery stores. Like the corner stores that they had were ran by Iranian guys. Not saying I have a problem with Iranians, but they were just people that didn't really care about the black male. So there was nothing. You couldn't go to these stores and get a banana or a tomato. It was constantly junk food. You had your potato chips and oodles and noodles and just stuff that was not healthy for the body, basically. So you're basically filled up on this negative energy from the food that you ingest to the music and the stuff that you ingest as a being, and this is what you're grown to be, just this embodiment of negative shit, basically. So everything about you is negative. And I never understood when I went to the mall, like the Galleria, that these little old white ladies didn't know who I was, but would clutch their purses. That I was like, oh, she's just racist. But now I understand. You can see a person, and by the way they carry themselves and by the way they talk, you can pretty much tell this person is not a good person. And I don't think that they're intentionally not a good person. It's just how they were brought up. They were made this way or brought up this way to think that life is basically a thing that you're supposed to survive, and by any means necessary. If you want something, you just go out and take it. You don't have to work for it. If you can't work for it, just take it. And a lot of guys to this day in certain areas of town are still this way, and I think it will remain this way in certain areas of town, because there's no development in these areas. They're still basically on the same path. You have your liquor store that's right next to the pawn shop. So you get drunk and you sell all your stuff, and then you get a little more drunk and depressed that you sold all your stuff. So the pawn shop that's next to the liquor store sells you a gun. And you go out and you do crime with this gun because you need money. And there are no jobs. Like, there's no factory jobs around Ensley. And for anybody that hears this, that knows Ensley, knows I'm telling the truth. There's no stores in this neighborhood that will sell you a fresh pear, a fresh banana. The food at the grocery stores down in Ensley is past due. It's just awful. Everything is awful down there. And from Ensley to 280 is a different world. It's like you travel just a few blocks or a few miles and you are in a totally different place. People are outside walking their dogs barefoot. And I know it may not seem like a surprise to some people, but to some people that's fucking incredible. Walking outside, walking a dog that's on a leash, you know, and being carefree. These people have never heard a gunshot in person or been around somebody being shot and falling to the ground or seen blood like this. So to some people, this is inconceivable, but to some people, this is life that they survive every day, that they go through every day, and they teach their kids the same way. And it's just a failed culture. And I'm speaking as a black male, and I'm speaking about the culture that I'm from, and the culture that I grew up in is a failing culture, and it's going to continue to fail because of the spirits that are put in place in these cultures and these people, and they can only teach their kids this.
Unless something like plants comes in and helps to teach.
Now, the peyote and the experience at the ceremony just humbled me. Oh my God, you can't explain the feeling of being around people. And now, quote, Warrior, Alabama in the early 60s was an awful place to be caught if you was a black male. In the trees, in the woods. So, yeah, me going there and being, for the most part, the only black person there, and being able to be around white people that don't want to harm me. If anything physical they want to do to me is come up and hug me, it's life-changing, you know? And I believe that just that little circle is going to continue to get bigger. We just need the right people to be involved, because a hug can change your life. Just that motion of holding somebody close to your being and breathing with them can change their life. And it's scientifically proven that a hug can change somebody's whole day. They could be going through something, having a very shitty day, and somebody just walks up and looks at them and say, hey, it's going to be okay, and just hugs them. That person may bust out crying. I just had a moment when I had to cry, So, I mean, basically humans being humans, we've lost our humanity, and we've lost, just the basic stuff because we let stuff like status get to us. Like, I may be a doctor and this person may work at McDonald's. At the end of the day, if all that was to fall away, you're still human, and just human interaction is what counts. Because I personally believe that one day the dollar will die, and it'll be back to borrow trade and, goods for, this for that, basically. And if you're a person that's in a space that have the opportunity to be wealthy, you should most definitely share the wealth or be nice to people. You don't have to necessarily give anybody anything that's, materialistic. Just a hug, just a friendly hello can change a person's life.
I mean, feeling like you're not seen, I think that's at the root of like people choosing not to be on this earth anymore.
Oh yeah. Most definitely. Nobody wants to feel like shit. Nobody wants to feel like another person is superior or, it's more than them. And it's hard. There are a lot of nice people, but the thing that's between us is this thing called race. It has to be, okay, he's black, he's this way. That person's white, they're this way. However, if all of us were blind or in the dark, we wouldn't know the difference. Basic humans being basic humans like we were created to do. And it's funny because cats and dogs can get along, but we can't.
Well, that's where I think you're speaking to like the system that wants to keep it that way. Like since I've been in Birmingham, I've been driving Lyft.
Oh yeah, Birmingham.
And the other day I got to drive this woman who she said she was about to turn 75, a black woman. I was taking her to the doctor. and she was saying how sad she was to see people killing each other in her community. And she was like, white people aren't our problem. It's black people killing black people. But I was like, white people are responsible for the whole system that put people into situations where violence is the only option. Like,
yeah, for the most part. But then you also had some of your white guys that got their ass beat right next to the black guys in the marches, you know. So it's like not all white people are bad. You most definitely have a lot that are, you know, a certain way, but you also have black people that are a certain way, because in the times of slavery, it wasn't just black people. I mean, white people owning black people. It was black people also that owned black people that were wealthy. They called them one-eyed willies, and they were worse than the original slave master. You know, it most definitely has something to do with that, because that system is still put in place to keep these people poor and underprivileged and uneducated. A lot of us don't read. We don't want to learn. But then again, it's a culture that, you know, you're learning about Christopher Columbus, and I don't want to offend anybody. You're learning that Christopher Columbus, Henry Morgan, all these guys were great men. In actuality, these guys were robbers. They were raping people. They were killing people. They were, you know, setting fire to people's homes, and they was basically taking anything they wanted. So when you're going to school and you're learning about this stuff, this basic bullshit, instead of teaching you real world skills, basically, and you learn about Thanksgiving, and the story of Thanksgiving is that Christopher Columbus came to America and he met people down here, and he gave them a big feast, which was the Indians, the natives. The Pilgrims gave them a big feast, which was Thanksgiving. And they were so thankful for the food because they hadn't ate so much food that they gave Christopher Columbus the land. It was only once you got older that you realized none of that shit happened, that they came down here and they basically destroyed these people. You know? So it's a lot of that has to do with trust, because you're lied to at an early age. Like, hey, there's a fat white guy that's gonna come to your house and give you toys. He's gonna fit down your chimney. And then I remember being young and looking at this chimney like, how in the fuck can this guy fit down here? Or, you know, there's spiders and stuff in this chimney. I just remember thinking stuff like that. But, you know, just so much stuff will make you question a lot of stuff. And sometimes it's hard to believe that people are good because you're used to negative things. Like me, I was so used to negative stuff that every time I see anybody that looked a certain way, I knew that they didn't like me. You know, they hate me because of my skin color or whatever. And sometimes it's true, because they've been taught the same way. You should interact with these people. They're bad people, you know. But at the end of the day, we're humans. And if the creator didn't want us to interact or be with each other, our parts wouldn't fit. Or when, you know, I couldn't be with this white woman and have a child, you know, basically. And me personally, I think that mixed kids in general are gorgeous. The beautiful hair, the beautiful skin tone. It's just the creation of new life, basically. Everything is beautiful. And kids from the ages of probably, I'd say, 2 to the age 6 will play with anybody, no matter what color they are. They don't see that. They just see a new friend, basically. It's only you learn to hate. You know, it's just like school. You learn to hate people for their color because of what you were taught, you know?
Well, what is it like for you now that you're on this path of healing? Because you're still going on an almost daily basis into like a pretty traumatic environment by working in prison. What is that like for you?
Going to these ceremonies helped me deal with the fact that I work in a prison and the fact that there is human suffering every day. You think about murderers and you think about rapists and you say to yourself, these people should suffer. Well, until you know how they suffer, you know, you shouldn't judge, because these people that I deal with that may have killed the person in a fit of rage, they live in subhuman conditions, and the water is not clean. The cells are not clean. They're filled with rats and roaches. They're filled with all types of diseases, and these people live in these cells. Like, they're treated worse than animals, basically. And it's an everyday thing. And this person has to worry about being stabbed to death or robbed because he has an extra bag of chips. His whites are a little cleaner than the other person's whites, and they're gonna take his, stuff from him. I've seen old guys get beat over the head and their groceries, like their little snacks, taken away from them because these younger guys, family don't come see them and they don't have money to put on their books. So they're in there suffering, and they're in there trying to do the best they can to survive this place. And I also see officers that are dirtier than the inmates that they deal with themselves. You're talking about officers that get paid, that will come to a person's family and tell them, hey, for this amount of money, I can make sure your family is safe. There was actually a case with this guy. I'm not going to say his name, but you can look it up. It happened probably 4 or 5 months ago, that had been taking money from a lot of people's families for protection. To protect their family members while they're in prison or whatever. And it was okay and all good until he started to raise his prices, and a lot of people didn't have the money, so they exposed him, and he eventually got locked up for it. This is, again, on Alabama Department of Corrections website if you want to check that out. But
I imagine he's going to have a hard time in
yeah.
prison.
Yeah, very much so.
Wow.
You have officers that bring in drugs, cell phones, and it's tempting because you have a lot of inmates that were drug dealers that still have a lot of money. So at Walmart, they have these things called track phones, and they're like $50. However, these inmates don't have phones, so they will pay you up to $400 to bring in a $50 phone.
Wow.
So imagine this guy going to Walmart and buying 10 $50 phones and the type of money that would bring back to him. Me personally, I've been approached several times, but me being the character I am, I'm like, well, for that amount of money, that's how much I'd pay my way into prison for, basically. And I see what they go through, and I most definitely don't want to go through that. It's rough, and I don't think humans weren't designed to go through that. This is man-made. The Creator is going to judge and punish us accordingly, but the stuff that they go through is far beyond belief. I mean, being in a cell all day, every day until the day you die could drive anybody crazy. Not only that, but you also have officers that beat on you, handcuff you to the back and beat you to the ground unconscious, anything like that. Or you have officers that pay prisoners to stab you, or it's just the prison system is failing, and it should be shut the fuck down. And I say that as a person that goes in there every day. No man should go through that. I don't care what he done. Let God be the judge of that. But our system and our justice system is awful. And then you have to think about it. People have these jobs to do certain things. Like this one person, his job is to go to work every day and find out who he has to kill legally. The executioner. The person that, switches the knob on the electric chair, that pumps the lethal injection to this person's vein. He's paid to kill people, basically. And he gets away with it scot-free. And I don't think the Creator is satisfied with that. This is something that's man-made, It's just, I can go on hours and hours about this stuff and just life in general and my perspective on life. And I'm not the best person, but I strive to be better than I am every day. Because, I'm beginning to open up and I'm beginning to learn more. And I believe that if you want to do better, you're most definitely going to do better. You're going to meet the right people. I can't even remember your name.
Maura.
Maura.
Yeah.
It's a coincidence that we came together, or it was fate that we came together. I was meant to come, meet you all and to talk to you or whatever. And, I just think that the more and more I try to succeed and try to be positive, the more positive people and the more positive things will happen.
Is that something that came through the medicine to you?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. That's why I can't wait for another ceremony, because every time I go, it's like I get more enlightened. I learn how to deal with life a different way. Basically, it's like those ceremonies cleanse me. Basically, I feel I feel so relieved, and it's like a burden has been taken away from me, and it's like each time I go, it's more and more cleansing that's going on. More and more I'm at peace. I was homophobic for a long time because, I couldn't hug a guy that was gay, that was bad in the black community. Any type of feminine anything is gay, and being gay is bad. However, my first ceremony, there was this guy that was gay, and I didn't really want to be by him because of, my mentality as growing up in that environment. However, while he was coughing in the medicine, I remember just rubbing his back, caring for him as a brother. And he hugged me afterwards, and I didn't feel any type of energy, any type of wrong. That wasn't wrong at all. Now I started to see that people are people, no matter what they believe in, no matter who they want to be with. It's not wrong. It's just people being people. So that's something
make
that's
me cry. Wow.
It's something that's opening my eyes. And you have to love these people because they are great people. And I think a lot of people need to realize that no matter who a person wants to be or who a person wants to be with, love that person no matter what, because that person is a human and God has made them, and he challenged us to love, basically, So
Has that changed your presence at work, do you think?
At work, for the most part, I can deal with people differently because I thought it was wrong. Because the type of situation they're in, like these guys are not really willing to be, hey, I'm in love with this guy. No, I'm forced to be with this guy. Like, it's really hard for white guys in prison. It's really hard. It's like reverse slavery, because if you're a white guy, you're pretty much going to be somebody's girlfriend in there. Also, these guys that are the girlfriends are pretty powerful. Like, the gangs will own these guys, these little white guys, these little young white guys, and they'll make them grow their hair out, and they look like women, and they put Kool-Aid on their lips, and they buy, like, this little guy would be 5'7". However, he'll buy a 4X t-shirt that comes all the way down to his knees. Now he cuts a split in each shoulder, and he has a little dress on, and he wraps his hair up. He looks like a woman. So he belongs to the Bloods. However, if one of the Crips find him attractive and they do anything to him, it starts a gang war or whatever. But yeah. And officers have been involved in these, situations, and they sometimes fall in love with these guys as well, But prison, I go every day, 5 days a week, 40 hours. Sometimes I have to stay over. We just reverted back to 8 hours. At first, when I first started working there, we were on 12-hour shifts, and if they needed you, they mandate you for 4 extra hours. So it was like I was in work release. Like, went to prison at 6 p.m. and sometimes I get out at 6 a.m. or 10 a.m. So it was like I get to go home for a few hours and I come back to prison or whatever. But I remember one time I had did a few mushrooms by myself, and I was thinking about that situation. It's like I kind of went into a trance, and I was thinking about the prison. As you walk into this place, there's gates. It's like you're going from the gate from this world to the gates of hell, and there's people suffering in there. You hear people screaming in there. People are constantly getting stabbed and dying, and every day is just an ongoing struggle of pain. And I was just thinking, like, at nighttime, all the screams and stuff, it's like hell. It's the experience that I had, and I never forget. One of the officers had killed a snake, It was a baby rattlesnake. So I wanted to take it home because I wanted to take it to a taxidermy. So I picked the snake up, and it looked like it almost kind of lift up. So I thought about what if it would have bit me, and I started thinking, like, it was a strange thought, but I was thinking, like, what if that snake would have bit me and I would have died right there, and I would have woke up in a cell? Like, this was hell. Like, these people probably are dead, and this is hell, and I don't know it. But if I died in there, then I would realize that this is hell. And these people are screaming. These people have lost their souls, so they're in this damnation because they're in chains basically, and they don't have light from the sun. So I don't know. It was just a theory that I thought of, but it's actually like once you step foot past those gates, the way they talk, the way they act, the way they look is different from anything out here in the real world. In the free world, a man can get stabbed to death for a bag of Frito-Lay chips. And I'm not talking about the big king size bag. I'm talking about the little individual bags because the food is so awful there. And like I said, you have guys that work in the kitchen that are part of certain gangs that don't like this person, so he's afraid to eat anything that this man serves, so he goes without food and will kill a man for this bag of chips. Or if this man takes anything from him, he already doesn't have anything, so he has to get it back in blood. And this goes on every day. That's why you hear about inmates stabbed to death at Donaldson Prison or St. Clair Prison. And this is what goes on. It's either about drugs, about love, or it's about food. And that's what these people live on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of these people have been there since they were in their early 20s. So made one bad mistake and they're suffering for the rest of their lives. And the officers, some of them just don't care about humanity at all. I have this older guy, and they say you should respect your elders. Well, this guy I really don't respect at all, because he'll tell a man, hey, you got 30 years, your life is over with. I'm going home. I'm finna go lay with my wife. I'm finna go do this and that. And one thing I know is we all know where we've been, but we don't know where we're going. Like, anything can happen that day. Say, for instance, he goes out and he gets shot, or, just paralyzed, paraplegic. People don't understand, man. You have to treat people a certain way. You have to live this life a certain way. And that's what I'm trying to, as the more and more I age, the more and more I realize that this life is basically a test, and everything that you do has different paths, basically. Every little action has a reaction, basically. If I was to pinch you, you would feel that pinch, right? If I was to hug you, you would feel love. If I was to pinch you, you would feel pain. Every action has a reaction.
So how do you kind of think about what you've been through in your life and some of the painful things that you've been through? Like, what do you make of a creator that was like, Damian, this is the experience that you're going to have in this human form?
I think it's a test to see if you'll bend or break. And if you don't know there's a creator, you would most definitely feel like you would think like, okay, these kids are suffering and these people are doing this to these people. What type of God will allow this to happen? So I don't know. I sometimes I go through different mindsets dealing with stuff like that. At one point I had gotten into the Rastafarian beliefs, and their beliefs is Haile Selassie, King of Ethiopia, was God, because of what the Bible was saying, that Christ will return in a new form and he'd be labeled as Kings of Kings and Lord of Lords from the tribe of Judah. So this guy Haile Selassie is from the tribe of Judah and was crowned Kings of Kings and Lord of Lords. So Bob Marley and them saw him as this is the God that they speak of. So that's their religion. They grow their hair to take the vow of the Nazarite. They don't cut their hair, and they won't cut their beards, and they won't eat certain meats, because this is how God considered these people to be holy in that day. So when they saw Selassie, they began to do this, that transformation, and they became Rastafarians, and they believed that the herb was a medicine, which it is, and it opened up their eyes to deal with what was going on in the world, and it was like a veil being uncovered for them to see the truth. And they started to see politicians as these beasts that the Bible spoke of that would do mass destruction. And I see it that way for the most part, because you have these people that start wars and they sit in their nice homes while these young men go fight a war that has nothing to do with them, and they lose their life or they lose their limbs. And while this guy is basically living his best life, drinking wine or whatever he's doing, while everybody else suffer. And I can get into the Bible and I can get into a lot of different stuff, and I can give you my version of what I think is right. But everybody have, different versions of what the truth is, and we all want to know the truth, basically. I think that's what everybody's struggling with, to deal with the truth. But we also, a lot of people want to pull the truth to their side, so I'm one of the people that know if I feel a certain way, this is the right thing, because we can hear something and not believe it, but it's only till you feel it, it's like you have a sense that this is what is right. Like taking fruit from a grocery store without paying for it. It's wrong, but it tastes right. But like I said, giving to a person that has no money, just giving them a piece of fruit, that feeling that you get is priceless. You've done something good, and it's right because you feel a certain way after you do it. And it may not be a lot to you, but it was a help to them, but you have that feeling like, I've done good today, so.
So you just kind of use that feeling as your compass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The feeling of doing right. That's what I'm trying to work on, for the most part. But then again, me working in that environment and trying to be this type of person surrounded by negativity is hard. And me personally, I love to smile. I'm a friendly guy for the most part, but working in that facility, I'm considered to be a weak officer. I have to talk to this inmate a certain way. I have to treat him a certain way because he's done this. I never forget when I first started working at the facility, we had this guy, and I think he's still there. I haven't been in SIG in a long time, but his last name is Blanton, and he's the last remaining survivor of the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing that killed the 4 little girls.
Wow.
In Birmingham. So I remember hearing about him when I was young. So now I'm at the prison where he's at. I couldn't wait to go down there and give him a piece of my mind. And let me tell you what the Spirit did, and I kid you not. I was on my way to talk to this guy, to talk shit to him in his face. And there was a black male in his early 20s across the hall from him right there. Like his cell faced his. And I was like, where's man? He said, Officer Warren, don't you go over there and mess with that old man, because he hadn't did nothing that we hadn't did. And that shit hit me so hard, because the guy who it came from now, the person who that message came from, I was not expecting that to come out of that boy. I thought that he'd be like, yeah. He said, leave that little old man alone. And it was so powerful. The words were so powerful that it touched me. And I knew that, it was somebody else speaking through him. Yeah.
I think that's something I'm realizing after, the film that Daniel and I are working on, talking to these guys that have spent decades in prison, and just realizing that, and this is not to say that there shouldn't be some kind of way that society agrees that we deal with people that are making bad decisions and that are causing harm, but it's like people that are causing harm are living in misery, like they're very unwell and they've been through really traumatic stuff that has caused them to, for their human programming to like go awry, if you want to think of it that way. And just realizing that like so many people are living in their own hells.
Oh, man. And you have to think about it. Put yourself in this place. You're a person that's left inside of a room with no other human interaction, and you're stuck in there for days, years, and you slowly start to lose your sanity, because these people lose sanity while they're in the hole. Like they start to forget who they are for the most part.
They're serving their whole time in the hole?
Yeah. What? Some of these people, because they can't go back to what we call population. These are for the people that have killed in the population. So they will go to segregation. So a lot of them go to segregation because they're afraid to go to population because they have enemies out on the outside. Mm-hmm. And then another thing about prison is, okay, you go to prison and you do your time and you come out, you're a convict, so you can't get good work. I mean, you can't get good work anywhere. You're labeled as this, and you have to tell people, no matter who you are, you could be the nicest guy anybody ever met. You could be totally innocent. You could have been at the wrong place at the wrong time. Once you get out of prison and you go apply to do the right thing, you talk to the hiring manager and he loves you, and then he looks and says, "Oh, you're a convict." That kills everything. It's like, well, we'll call you if we have anything, and you never hear that. Mm-hmm. So you fall back into the basic human necessity of needing to eat, needing a place to stay. You can't afford to do it the right way, so guess what? Mm-hmm. You have to do it by any means necessary to survive, and it goes back to being in the prison system because you robbed somebody, you bust a window, A lot of people that's on the street, they go to jail when it gets cold because they need shelter. They'll go do public damage like bust a window just to go get inside, of a place and have a free meal.
So fucked
be
up.
warm, yeah. And it goes on. So, this life, man, this life, if it's the way it's said to be, where you have to explain everything, hell is gonna bust wide open. Wide open. And these people that live these extravagant lives, man, like these false prophets, the televangelists, these people are the biggest crooks ever. I remember my mother used to give money to this guy called Robert Tilton. She gave him $100 one time. So imagine being vulnerable and not reading for yourself and listening to these televangelists saying, I got the spirit that somebody out there has it in their heart to give me $50. They never say, a specific person, but they said, the Lord said this person, you're going through this. And they give a basic scenario that a lot of people are going through. And in your mind, you're thinking, hey, I'm that person. And you give what you can and you never get anything back in return, but probably a little cloth dipped in some type of fragrance, And this is how people make their money. And I remember as I got older, I looked at Robert Tilton's video and everything was about money. Send me this much. I remember one particular video, he said, can I send $50? No, that's not enough. The Lord said, give everything you got and you'll be blessed tenfold. So people will give all that they have and end up with nothing. And this person lives a lifestyle.
That's just a moment. She's listening to us. That's what's so wild about prison, especially when you're talking about like corrupt officers. It's just like who's behind the walls and who's free is so fucking arbitrary.
Yeah. Just imagine that you already don't have anything and you may have made a mistake and beat this kid's ass when you were young. Just so happened this kid is the warden over the prison that you're at now. How are you going to survive? And prisoners, man, from working in a prison, every prison in America needs to be shut the fuck down. It needs to burn. That shit is awful. Take it from me. Every time I go to work, I see human suffering. And my girlfriend, like sometimes I stay at home and I just sit at home and she thinks that I'm mad at her or anything like that. I'm like, hey, babe, you got to understand. I work in a prison 40 hours a week. Sometimes I just need days to be absolutely by myself and deal with what the fuck I've just seen on this day or what I've went through on this day. It's hard. It's rough. It's
I
very
hope you can
rough.
Get out of there soon.
Yeah, I want to get out of there, but it's just not me. It's, even if I get out of there, they're still going to be going through it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so this is obviously not like we could talk about this for days. So this is a really big question, but I think when a lot of people hear things like, I say I'm a prison abolitionist, and they're like, oh, what, you just want to open the doors and all the bad guys like run into the street? So do you have any thoughts about like what steps would help us replace prisons essentially, or
Labor camps? Not well. Allow them to be paid though, not just because that's slavery again. But a lot of these people are very talented. There's some people that can draw you. Look at you one time and draw you to the T. Put your likeness on paper. They look like it'll jump out and shake your hand. These people make guitars. These people can build stuff. They can do so much than be in a prison all day.
It's like let them use their gifts.
Yeah. It'll be better, because everybody has a bad side to them. Unfortunately, these people have done something that people deem so bad that they can't be replaced. So this guy's a murderer. However, this soldier that you give all these awards to has went into villages and killed kids. So what's the difference?
Amen. Yeah.
There is no difference. A killer is a killer, right? And it's crazy because we praise people like that. Have you ever seen that movie American Sniper? Like he had so many medals, and each medal was from a person he killed. Like he had over 100-something medals. So why would we praise somebody like this and be so hard on this person for doing the exact same thing? But the difference between a person that killed somebody when they was young was probably they were very upset at that situation. However, this person has signed up to go to a totally different country and kill strangers, not knowing anything about this person or the life that they're living. And these people, from my understanding, these third world countries are forced to go to the military. It's not a choice. Just like in the early 60s, it wasn't a choice. It was the draft. It didn't matter what you thought of or believed in. Because you was a certain age and you were able-bodied, you had to go to war. And I wanted to join the military at one point just to see the world. I wanted to travel because a lot of people will live and die in the same state. Never get to see outside of this wall. And I knew that the Navy traveled like overseas, and I wanted to go see these places, smell the air, because everything is different, man. And a lot of people, we won't ever get to do that. So the military was my outlet. I made a decision that I was not going to be the guy that was living on the streets or the guy that lived with my girlfriend. I wanted to be the guy that was able to take care of himself. So if I couldn't get a job by the age, I was a certain age, like military cutoff, I was just going to go to the military. But it didn't work out that way, and I'm glad.
Me too, yeah.
Yeah, so like I say, I'm glad that I get to meet new people. And I never thought that when I saw you and Daniel the first time that I'd be here with you all.
Right.
Yeah. I never thought that. And just turns out that you all were interested in what goes on in the prison, and just turns out there's a correction officer that goes to these places that you can get, firsthand, hands-on information about exactly what goes on.
Well, it's so amazing because like you're becoming a conduit for the medicine now that you're developing this relationship with the plants and your direct relationship with Creator, and then you're going into this environment. Like I hope for the sake of your life you're able to do something else soon. But like for right now, you're channeling that energy into this environment that probably does not get that energy at all.
Chris wants to come up there. He wants to come up there, and I've been talking to my warden, and he's going to talk to Chris.
So the warden knows what you've been up to?
Yeah. He told
How'd
me
that
that,
go?
He told me, I was like, I'm going to just go ahead and tell you hands-on that I do peyote, I do mushrooms. I hadn't took the marijuana in a while or whatever. This is what I do. And he was like, well, you can't have it in your system. It can't show up. And I was like, well, the thing is, there's a federal mandate stating that I can. He was like, well, no matter what the rules say, you can't. And I'm like, okay. So I hadn't did the cannabis in a while. However, I'm yearning to do the cannabis because it's just a different feeling, man. Like when you sit and you smoke or you take mushrooms, there's nothing that somebody can tell you that you can't feel. You feel different, you know. And alcohol, this stuff is legal, alcohol, that puts people into a rage, that they want to go out and kill people. I've never thought about killing anybody while I smoked, you know.
Yeah.
Only thought about sitting there laughing and giggling and having a good time, listening to music. I believe that's another reason why it's illegal, because you don't want to fight wars when you're, you know, going through cannabis or mushrooms. You want to love. And if you want to love and there's no war, there's no reason for these people to take land. You know, America is the world's police. Peter Tosh, a Jamaican reggae singer, said, weed grows in Jamaica. How can America come over here and tell me I can't smoke something that grows right here? So if weed grew in America, could I go to America and tell them not to use it? You know? But war, I mean, it's just people want to be the leaders in the house of the rising sun, which is the earth. They call it the house of the rising sun, and everybody wants to be in control of it, when the creator is the one that's in control of it, you know. And I think we just need to take a step back and be humans. Get out there in the woods, you know, because I guarantee you, if Donald Trump or whoever these leaders were to have this type of experience, they wouldn't be the same people to this day. You know, people that fight against this type of stuff, they wouldn't fight against it anymore. Once they experience it themselves, you know, and experience that love, this is feelings that you can't pay for, no matter how much money you offer. You can't pay for these type of experiences. The ceremonies, no matter what type of money you had, you could never experience that type of feeling. Those type of people coming together, everybody feeling the same way, and not even in a big grand building. We're in the middle of the woods, the earth, you know, and you feel a certain way, and it's beautiful. These are experiences that money can't buy, you know. So,
well, and I'd love to help more people get out there too, who are coming from like communities where you grew up, like people that don't have access necessarily.
Yeah, they most definitely need to see a different side.
Just get the medicine too and feel that belonging. And well, thank you for sharing. You're really generous to share your story.
No problem. I don't mind talking. And it's most definitely a subject we can talk about for days and days, and you know, it can continue to go on. So,
is there anything we didn't touch on that you want to talk about?
I don't know. We talked about a lot of stuff, but I don't know. The only thing I can say is, and I always quote people that I heard and things that I like, and a person said, it's very nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. So
thank you.
That's one good thing.
If people want to connect with you, is there a place that they could find you?
I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
And I'm on Instagram. It's Damian Vonner. Damian Vonner.
Beautiful. Thank you, Damian.
Yeah, or you all can get in touch with Maura. They can call me.
Perfect.
Yeah. So.
Thank you all so much for being here once again. I know these conversations aren't always easy to hear, but I really believe that it is part of our job as a single human cell in the human species body to witness one another's experiences, and that is how suffering is dissipated and transformed. And I think the power of our witness is the medicine, really, that's coming back into the world in these times. I feel it happening, and I'm really grateful to all of you for being part of that here. I came across an Instagram account recently. It's called Aging in Prison, and it's a photojournalism project by this amazing journalist named Jessica Earnshaw. And I don't think that it's current anymore. I think she's done with it, but all the back photos and stories are there. And it's a project about recording the lives of people who are aging in American prisons. And it's really powerful and beautiful, and just encourage you to deep dive that if you want to continue down the rabbit hole of today's story. Come find me online until we hang here again next week. MauraJames.com and Maura James on Instagram. And yes, you can find the link to Saving America in both those places as well. Thank you for your love and support. I'll see you so soon.